14 names on a wall, 7 girls tied in a room with no windows, and a man who called himself their father. This is what they found behind that door.
On the evening of March 14th, a woman living on Thornton Road in Bradford picked up her phone and called the police. She had been watching a white transit van parked outside a terraced house for 3 days. Different girls going in, none of them coming out. When the call handler asked how many she had seen, she said at least 6. All of them young, none of them looking older than 15. She said she was not a troublemaker. She said she had grandchildren their age. That was exactly why she was calling. 2 uniformed officers from Bradford Central responded first. They were not expecting much. A worried neighbor, most likely, a misunderstanding that would sort itself out in 10 minutes. But when they pulled up to Thornton Road and sat watching the house from their car, they saw something that made the first officer reach for his radio without saying a word to his colleague. A girl in a school uniform was being walked to the front door by a heavy-set man in a pressed shirt. The man looked up and down the street before he let her in. Then the door closed. Then the street was empty again. The house was registered to a 52-year-old man named Gerald Okafor. According to council records, Gerald lived there alone. His last known employment was as a youth outreach worker for a local charity, a position he had quietly left 18 months earlier without explanation. No one had followed up. No one had asked why. What the officers did not know yet, and what would only become clear over the following 72 hours, was that Gerald had been under a separate intelligence watch by the West Yorkshire Safeguarding Unit for the past 4 months. The moment their radio check flagged the address, they were told to hold their position. Do not knock. Do not make contact. Wait for backup. They waited 11 minutes. The safeguarding sergeant who arrived was a woman named Hayes, who had been doing this work for 14 years. She took one look at the transit van and one look at the house and told her officers they were going in. When they knocked, it took 40 seconds for the door to open. Gerald Okafor stood in the doorway looking completely untroubled. He was calm in the way a man is calm when he believes he has done nothing wrong, or when he has spent a very long time practicing how to appear that way. He smiled. He stepped aside. He invited them in without being asked. The front room was immaculate. A sofa, a television, a coffee table with a Bible on it, and nothing else. No shoes by the door. No coats on the rack. No cups on the counter. No sign that anyone was living there at all, let alone 6 young girls. Hayes walked slowly through the space without rushing. She noticed a door at the back of the kitchen was closed. She noticed the carpet leading towards it was slightly worn, pressed flat and thin, the way carpet looks when many feet have crossed it many times over a long period of time. She asked Gerald how many people were in the house. He said just himself. He explained that young people from his congregation sometimes visited for mentoring sessions. Community work, he said. He had been doing it for years. Their parents knew they were there. He could provide numbers if needed. When Hayes asked specifically about the back room, Gerald said that was his personal space, and he would rather they didn't. She asked again. He paused. In that pause, she saw everything she needed to see. She told him to step outside with one of her officers. He went without resistance. When they opened the back room door, there were 7 girls inside. The youngest was 11. The oldest was 16. They were sitting on mattresses laid directly on the floor. There was no furniture. There were no windows. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. On the far wall, someone had written a list of names in black permanent marker. 14 names. Not all of them belonged to girls who were currently in the room. Not all of them could be immediately accounted for. One girl, 15 years old, looked up at Hayes when the door opened. She did not look frightened. She looked exhausted in the particular way a person looks when they stopped expecting to be rescued a long time ago and had quietly made peace with that fact. Hayes crouched down to her level and told her they were police and she was safe. She asked how long they had been there. The girl said Gerald had told them their parents had sent them to him. He had called the house a safe house. He had told them the outside world was not safe for girls without fathers. He had told them God had chosen him to be their father now. Some of them had been there for weeks. Some had been there for much longer. Outside on the pavement, Gerald Okafor was still calm. He was still smiling faintly. He told the officer standing with him that he had done nothing but serve his community his entire life. He said God was his witness. The officer said nothing back. When Hayes came through the front door, she walked straight to Gerald and arrested him on suspicion of child exploitation, false imprisonment, and controlling and coercive behavior. He closed his eyes when she said it. Not in shock. It was more the look of a man who had always known this moment would come and had long ago decided how he would meet it. He did not struggle. He did not raise his voice. He said quietly that he wanted a solicitor. In the hours that followed, the investigation opened into something far larger than a single terraced house. Phone records from Gerald's confiscated devices showed contact with at least 9 families across Bradford, Leeds, and Huddersfield. Single mothers, widows, women who had recently arrived in the country and had not yet found their footing, women in difficult circumstances who had been looking for someone trustworthy, someone stable, someone who could offer their daughters safety and structure. Gerald had positioned himself in every case as exactly that person. A godly man, a mentor, a community figure with a proven record of helping young people, someone who could take their daughters under his wing when they had no one else to turn to. The 14 names on that wall represented 14 girls who had passed through the house over 2 years. Gerald had been operating what he called a spiritual boarding arrangement, bringing the girls in under the pretense of religious education and protection, then slowly and methodically cutting off their contact with the outside world. A phone taken away for safekeeping. A visit home postponed. A mother told her daughter was doing so well and needed just a little more time to complete her program. Small steps. Patient steps. The kind that are almost invisible until you look back and see how far they stretch. When family liaison officers began calling the families that night, the responses were not uniform. One mother screamed so loudly the officer had to hold the phone away from her ear. Another went completely silent and stayed that way for a long time before asking, barely above a whisper, whether her daughter was alive. She was. They all were. But the question itself said everything about how long that mother had been living without certainty. The 7 girls from Thornton Road were taken to a place of safety before midnight. The 15-year-old was the last to leave the house. She stepped out through the front door into the wet pavement and stopped. The rain had just passed and the air was cold. She tilted her face upward and closed her eyes. A paramedic standing nearby asked if she was all right. She said yes. She said she just wanted to feel the cold air for a moment. She said she had almost forgotten what it felt like. Gerald Okafor was charged on 11 counts. He pleaded not guilty. His trial was listed for the following autumn. The woman who had made the original phone call was 68 years old. She was a retired dinner lady named Margaret who had lived on Thornton Road for 31 years. She was never named in any official report, and she asked for no recognition of any kind. When a family liaison officer called to thank her, she said she had only done what any decent person would do. She said she hoped that if it had ever been her grandchildren behind that door, somebody would have done the same.